If you've been wondering what it's like to spend time with one of the most colorful wild stallions I've ever met, then this episode is for you. I'm your host, Carol Walker, and let's get started. Welcome to the Freedom for Wild Horses podcast, the place to find out about wild horses in the American West and what you can do to help them stay wild and free. If you love wildlife, wild horses, and the freedom that they stand for, this show is for you. I'm your host, Carol Walker. Let's get started. On a spring day 6 years ago, I was driving up Crooks Gap Road just before dawn. I saw a large family near the road, mostly bay mares, and an older gray stallion. Then I spotted a young stallion who clearly had his sights set on winning one of the mares, or more, and he was a Leopard Appaloosa. I was so excited to see a horse this color. Leopard Appaloosas have a white base coat with spots over their entire bodies, and I had never seen a horse with this coat pattern in the wild before. He has large brown spots from his barrel to his tail, and a brown stripe down his nose to his muzzle. I stood by my car watching the family, and he walked right by me, completely ignoring me, intent on the mares. He was average in size, and the gray stallion was larger, so I wasn't sure if he was going to have any success. The next time I encountered Looking Glass, the following year, he had a black mare and her black colt. She was very big and stocky, and her colt was about a year old. Looking Glass seemed very proud of his new family. The mare was not sure about me, staying well behind him, but Looking Glass was relaxed and unbothered by my presence. My next trip that summer, he was across the road from his family, and when he saw me stopping on the road, he ran by, lit up by the dawn light. I'd never seen him move so fast. Every time I went to the Red Desert Complex, I looked for him and his family, but usually could not find him in the spring. He went somewhere I could not find until summer. In 2020, there was a roundup, and his herd in Lost Creek was one of the 5 herds targeted. It was a freezing 10 degrees, and yet the helicopter kept flying. My friends who witnessed this said he just didn't move when the helicopter approached, so it left he and his family there. I was so relieved that they had not been rounded up and removed. There were so many other wonderful wild horse families that are gone from this area for good after that roundup. The next summer, Looking Glass had accumulated more mares. He had stolen a gorgeous buckskin pinto mare, Grace, from the stallion Storm, and he and Storm's families were usually near each other, and Storm used to have a very large family. Looking Glass also still had the black mare Brenna and had kicked out her colt, but she had a new bay filly, Tori. In August, I was thrilled to meet Looking Glass's first Appaloosa foal, Donata. She has a blanket of spots on her rear end and is a gorgeous buckskin color. Grace was very protective of Donata, and when Looking Glass lowered his head to come close to his new daughter, Grace kicked at him, making sure he kept a respectful distance. On a very cold day in October, later that year, I was driving along, hoping to find one of the wild horse families I've grown to love in the Red Desert. As I am looking, I spot something black. Because there are still cattle out there, I wait until deciding that it's a horse. And I look through my binoculars and I see something white, spotted white. It's them. The wild stallion Looking Glass and his family. Now, how to get to them? I know there's a 2-track nearby, but I'm uncertain as to whether or not it will bring me closer to them. The wind is blowing hard, and clouds are on the horizon, showing the gathering storm. The horses are grazing, unconcerned. I finally find a grown-over, little-used 2-track, and I turn onto it, and I drive closer to the horses. I stop my car, zip up my jacket, and put up my hood. My camera's in my hand as I start to walk toward them. Not all of the horses in this area of Lost Creek would tolerate my approaching them, especially in this wind, But I'm familiar with this family, and Looking Glass is one of the most easygoing wild stallions I have ever encountered. The first thing I notice as I walk closer is what good condition they are all in, especially Looking Glass and his first mare, Black Brenna. They are fat and ready for winter. And when I see the adorable blanket Appaloosa filly Donata, I am struck by her color. She looks like she might be buckskin, but now with her summer coat shedding and her new winter coat coming in, she is much darker, almost black, and I wonder what color she will end up. Foals can change so much. I watch her, and her mother Grace comes toward me. Donata is curious and unafraid. She stays close to her mother. Looking Glass approaches Grace and puts his head and neck against her, arching his neck, courting her, but she squeals and turns away. They all resume grazing. I took some photographs and some video. If they didn't want me near, it would have been a simple thing for them to turn and walk away. They would not even have to run because I'm so much slower, especially among the sagebrush. Grace keeps both eyes on me, but has relaxed. The filly is very curious. Them allowing me to spend time with them is a gift, a huge one. The only sound is the wind whipping by and my coat rubbing when I move. We are all alone in the vast prairie, and I'm there with these beautiful horses. They don't need anything from me. They're at home in this place. They know where the water is. They have plenty of forage. They have each other. And at least for this time, they're unmolested by helicopters. In these moments, I forget all my worries, all my to-dos, and I'm simply breathing in the beauty and feeling connected with this remote and ruggedly beautiful place and this special family of wild horses. Before I leave this family, I tell them how much they mean to me. We don't need words, they understand, and my heart is full. The winter of 2022 to 2023 killed over half the wild horses in the Red Desert Complex. The snows came in with a fury in December and did not stop until mid-April. There were 10 to 16-foot snowdrifts in several of the herd management areas. Although I flew over the area in February, which was the only way to get any access, we were not able to see most of the complex because of the turbulence in the air was so bad, but I could see a seemingly endless carpet of white that covered the forage the horses needed to survive the winter. And in May, when I could finally get into the area with my vehicle, so many horses were dead. Entire families died together, trapped by the snow and with no food left. I could not find Looking Glass and his family, and I had feared they did not make it. But just after I left for home, another photographer posted images online of them. They were very thin, but they'd made it, and Grace, the amazing mother she was, had kept Donata alive. When I visited in June, they had all put on weight with the new grass and looked much better. Looking Glass had even added a graceful black mare to his family. She was shy but beautiful, and in July, Grace had a new filly, a little buckskin named Quinn. Donata was protective of her little sister, and they were so beautiful together. There were 3 other families that stayed near Looking Glass all summer and fall, and I got used to seeing them all together. Storm had been in some fights, was cut up, and only had one mare and her 3-year-old colt left in his family. Seamus, a big, beefy, dappled gray stallion, had a big family, and no stallion was brave enough to get in his way. Then a black stallion with a pinto mare and her filly and a gray mare hung back, rather shy, and there was a black stallion, a black mare, and their new black foal. When I left in the fall, I expected everything to be the same on my return this year in May, but everything had changed. After the winter, there were many more stallions left than mares. The mares who were nursing and who were heavily pregnant didn't have a good chance to survive. So with so many more stallions, there was more fighting, more moving around to different areas. And Looking Glass was definitely more of a lover than a fighter, and he was small compared to many of the stallions in Lost Creek. I saw him at a far distance with a black mare I'd never seen before, and her new bay foal, and she started running when she saw my car a half a mile away. And when I returned the next month, she had settled down, so I was able to approach Looking Glass and his new mare and foal. And Seamus had an even larger family with a couple new mares and foals. And then there was Storm, all alone with a huge square of hide torn from his haunch. Clearly, there'd been some fighting and some changes in these families. Looking Glass kept casually walking by Seamus's family, eyeing the mares, but there's no way he'd be able to take on the much bigger and more dominant stallion. I looked for, but never found, Grace and her girls. The stallion that won them must have moved into another area entirely. When I came back in September, there was a huge group of horses, about 6 families plus bachelor stallions on a hill. I stopped my vehicle quite a way back from them, and then I start slowly walking. They're on high alert, no doubt from all the hunters. And as I walk, I see Looking Glass and his mare and foal at the back of the group, and suddenly they all take off running. They look fit and fat and sassy, even though it's been a dry summer, and they look so beautiful running together for the joy of it, some of them kicking up their heels. I hope that this winter is not a harsh one, and that I will see them again next year. The wild horses in America are not starving. They're not destroying the land they live on. They do not need to be rounded up with helicopters, separated from their families, hauled to filthy, disease-ridden feedlots, where they live in overcrowded conditions with other horses who are strangers. They do not need to be adopted and either trained to be ridden or sold off at auction to slaughter. They live their own lives with their own relationships to each other, and they make the land they live on more beautiful by their presence. They contribute to the health of the range they inhabit, and when they are gone, our lives will be so much poorer for their absence. They are a gift in and of themselves and need to be treated that way. Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom for Wild Horses. If you want to see some photos of Looking Glass and his family mentioned in this podcast, you can go to www.wildhoofbeats.com/podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom for Wild Horses. If you want to learn more, follow me at www.wildhoofbeats.com for more information and for ways to help America's wild horses. See you next time.